The voicemail from my uncle came in 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and I almost didn't listen to it. I'd been in back-to-back calls since 7 that morning, 3 client check-ins, a quarterly review with my operations lead, and an hour-long negotiation with a supplier in Vancouver that left me with a headache I could feel behind my eyes. My phone was sitting face down on the kitchen counter while I made tea, and when I finally flipped it over and saw his name on the screen, I almost put it back down. My uncle isn't the kind of person who calls to check in. He calls when he wants something or when he wants to remind you of something, usually something about yourself that you'd rather forget. I pressed play anyway. "Hey, just wanted to let you know your grandmother's birthday dinner is the 23rd. Your mom said you might be busy as usual." He paused just long enough for that to land. "We're doing it at the house. Elaine is cooking. Should be a good time. Connor just got some big news and we all want to celebrate together. Family stuff, you know how it is. Anyway, let us know." He hung up. I stood there with my mug of chamomile and stared at the wall for a second. Connor, my cousin, my uncle's only son, who had been predestined for greatness since roughly the age of 9 when he got into a competitive hockey program, and my uncle bought him a full set of gear that cost more than my mum's monthly groceries at the time. Connor, who had gone to Queen's for business, who had worn a suit to Christmas dinner 3 years in a row to make a point, who had once told me at a family barbecue, in front of everyone, with a beer in his hand and a smile on his face, that freelancing was a hobby that pays, sometimes. Big news, they wanted to celebrate. I put my phone down and went to bed. I didn't RSVP for 4 days. Here's what my family knew about me at that point. I had dropped out of my second year at Ryerson. I had spent 2 years doing contract graphic design work from a rented room in Kensington Market. I had gone through a period where I was definitely not okay. Not financially, not emotionally, not in any way that I would have admitted at the time. My mum knew some of it. My grandmother knew none of it. My uncle knew enough to use it. Here's what my family did not know. That the contract graphic design work had turned into something else entirely. That at 27, I had co-founded a small creative agency out of that rented room in Kensington Market with a woman I'd met through a client referral. That we had a team of 11 people now, remote first, headquartered technically in Toronto but honestly spread across the country. That we worked with mid-sized brands on brand identity, campaign strategy and content. And that last year, our revenue had crossed the 2 million mark for the first time. I hadn't told my family any of this, not because I was ashamed and not because I was strategically waiting for some dramatic reveal. I just hadn't. The conversations never went that direction. When I called my mum on Sundays, we talked about her garden and whether my dad was eating enough vegetables since his blood pressure thing. When I saw my uncle at Christmas, he talked about Connor. It was easier to let him. The problem was that easier had started to feel like a trap. My business partner, I'll call her Ren because she'd kill me if I used her real name in something like this, had been telling me for 2 years that I needed to stop shrinking. "You walk into a room and make yourself smaller," she said once, not unkindly. "You don't have to announce yourself, but you could at least stop apologizing for taking up space." I thought about Ren a lot in the 4 days I spent not RSVPing to my grandmother's birthday dinner. I RSVP'd yes on a Thursday morning, right before a client call. I typed the text to my mom, hit send, and then put my phone away and went to work. My grandmother lives in Oakville, in the same house she's lived in since 1978. It's a brown brick bungalow with a backyard that backs onto a ravine, and it smells like cedar and the particular brand of hand lotion she's used for as long as I can remember. She turned 78 that April, and she still does her own gardening and beats my uncle at Scrabble, which I find deeply satisfying. I drove out on the 23rd, which was a Saturday. I had a call at 8 in the morning, a UK client, time difference, and then I cleaned up, changed, and got in my car. The drive from Toronto to Oakville is 40 minutes on a good day and longer on a Saturday afternoon, but I'd given myself time. I had a podcast episode queued up and a coffee in the cough holder. I arrived at 4:15. There were already 4 cars in the driveway and along the street, which meant I was not the last one there but close to it. I could hear voices through the front door before I even knocked. My grandmother opened it herself. She's small. I'm taller than her now by probably 4 inches, and I'm not particularly tall. And she took both my hands in hers and looked at me the way she always does, like she's checking something. "You look tired," she said. "I'm fine, Grandma." "You always say that." But she smiled and pulled me inside, and for a minute it was just her and her cedar smell and the warmth of the house, and I was glad I came. That lasted approximately 4 minutes. My uncle found me in the kitchen while I was pouring myself a sparkling water. He's a big man, always has been, with the kind of presence that takes up more room than his actual body. He clapped me on the shoulder the way he does, firm, like he's testing something. "Glad you could make it," he said. "We know you're busy." He says that the way other people say we know you don't really have anything going on. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. "Good, good." He looked around the kitchen. "Connor's in the living room. You should go say hi. He's got some exciting news. We're waiting until everyone's together to do the whole thing properly, but..." He smiled. "Big things happening." "That's great," I said. "Yeah." He looked at me for a moment. "You know, I always said Connor had the drive. Some people just have it, you know. That real ambition. The kind that takes you somewhere." He wasn't looking at me when he said it. He was looking at the living room, where Connor was visible through the doorway, holding a drink and laughing at something. I took a sip of my sparkling water. I said. He wandered off. I stayed in the kitchen a little longer than was strictly necessary. My Aunt Elaine had made a full spread roast chicken, roasted potatoes, green beans, a salad that had clearly been assembled with care. My grandmother sat at the head of the table. I ended up across from my cousin's girlfriend, a woman named Petra who I'd met once before at Easter and who seemed, honestly, like she was also just trying to get through the evening, and next to my mom, who kept touching my arm in the way she does when she's either happy to see me or worried about something, possibly both. Connor sat at the other end of the table, next to my uncle. He's a few years older than me, broad-shouldered, with the easy confidence of someone who has never had to audition for a room. We get along fine, actually. That's the thing people don't understand about family dynamics like this. Connor and I don't have a problem with each other. The problem is entirely my uncle's construction, and Connor has been living inside it so long, I don't think he even sees it anymore. We were most of the way through the chicken when my uncle tapped his wine glass. "Okay," he said. "I know we're here for Mum's birthday and we're going to get to that." My grandmother made a small dismissive gesture, but I just have to say something about Connor because I am genuinely so proud of this kid. He went on for a while. He talked about Connor's work ethic, his dedication, the years he'd put in. He talked about Queens, about the early years in banking, about the lateral move to the investment firm in Toronto 2 years ago that my uncle had described to me at the time as a smart play. He talked about it all with the particular fluency of a man who has narrated his son's life so many times the story is completely smooth, no rough edges left. Connor looked mildly embarrassed, which I will give him. "Anyway," my uncle finally said, "he's been offered a director of strategy position at Meridian Capital Partners, youngest director in their firm's history. Starts in 6 weeks. The table made appropriate noises. My grandmother said she was proud. My Aunt Elaine put her hand over her mouth. My mum said, "Oh, that's wonderful," and squeezed my arm, and I was not entirely sure if she was celebrating Connor or quietly encouraging me. My uncle looked across the table directly at me. "See, this is what happens when you put in the work," he said. "Real work, not just," he waved a hand, "project to project, figuring it out. A real career built on itself. Compound interest, right? Every year counts." He was smiling. It was a generous smile, the kind you can't argue with because on the surface it's just a man proud of his son. "Absolutely," I said. You know what Connor's compensation package looks like now? He named a number. It was a good number. A real number, the kind that signals arrival. That's what real investment looks like. You put in the years, you build the credentials, the rewards come. My mum's hand was still on my arm. I could feel her tension. My daughter is doing well too, she said quietly, and I loved her for it. My uncle smiled at her. Of course she is, he said. I'm sure the design stuff keeps her busy. The design stuff? Ren's voice in my head. You don't have to announce yourself, but you could at least stop apologizing for taking up space. I took a breath. Actually, I said, it's less design these days and more operations. We scaled up quite a bit in the last couple of years. My uncle's eyebrows moved, just slightly. Oh yeah? Still freelancing? No, we have a full team now, 11 people. I picked up my water glass. We do brand strategy and creative for mid-sized companies, long-term retainers mostly, some project work. Connor was looking at me now, so was Petra. Huh, my uncle said. Good for you. It's tough out there for small businesses, especially creative. The market's pretty saturated. He turned back to Connor. Anyway, the firm has incredible. We're doing all right, I said. Something in my voice made him pause. I hadn't planned this. I want to be clear about that. I had not driven to Oakville with a speech prepared. I was not wearing a wire. I had no index cards. I was just sitting at my grandmother's table eating Elaine's roast chicken, and something had finally gotten tired of sitting down. We crossed 2 million in revenue last year, I said, which was a good year for us. We're on track to beat that this year. The table was quiet. Not dramatically quiet. It wasn't a movie. My grandmother was still eating. Petra looked politely interested. My mum had gone very still in the way she goes, still when she's trying not to react visibly. But my uncle had put down his fork. 2 million, he repeated. Revenue, yes. Margins obviously different, but we're comfortable. He looked at me for a long moment. I could see him processing it, running the math, recalibrating something. You have 11 employees, plus contractors, but 11 on the payroll, yeah. And you run this? You and a partner. I'm CEO. My co-founder handles operations and client relationships on the West Coast side. Connor said slowly, I didn't know that. Most people don't, I said. And then, because Ren was so clearly in my head at this point, she might as well have been sitting next to me. I'm pretty quiet about it. My uncle picked his fork back up. He took a bite of potato. He chewed it very deliberately. Well, he said. That was all. But the table had shifted. I could feel it. Not dramatically, not in any way I could point to. Just a subtle rearrangement of weight, the way a room changes when the light does. My grandmother looked at me across the table. She has these pale grey eyes that have always seemed to see more than she lets on. She gave me a very small nod. The kind that means I already knew you had it in you. I was just waiting for you to show up. I looked back at her and felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. After dinner, my uncle found me in the backyard. It was a cool April evening. This is Canada. April still has teeth, and I was standing by the fence at the edge of the ravine, not really looking at anything, just breathing outside air. He came up beside me and stood there for a moment without saying anything. I didn't know, he said finally. I know. Your mom didn't say anything. She didn't know the details. I don't really talk about it much, with family. He was quiet for a moment. Somewhere in the ravine something rustled. A raccoon, probably. This is Oakville. Why not, he said. And I thought about that, really thought about it, standing there in the April cold with the lights from the house behind us. Because it was easier, I said, and then it became a habit. And then I stopped. I think I was waiting to feel like I'd earned the right to say it out loud, like it would jinx it if I talked about it too soon. That's a long time to wait. Yeah. He nodded slowly. He's not a man who apologizes easily. I know that. I've known it my whole life. But he was also not, I realized, a bad man. Just one who had looked at me for a long time and only seen what he expected to see. Connor's going to do well, he said. That job is genuinely good. I wasn't making that up. I know, I'm happy for him. But you've built something real. He said it carefully like he was weighing it. That's real. I looked out at the ravine. Thanks, I said. We went back inside. My grandmother blew out the candles on her cake, a lemon olive oil cake my mum had made from a recipe she'd found online, which came out slightly lopsided and perfect. We sang off-key the way families do. My grandmother made a wish and didn't tell us what it was, which she has never done, ever, and when I asked her about it afterward, she just smiled and said some things are private. I drove home on the 403 with the windows down a crack, cold air coming in, the Toronto skyline appearing in pieces as I got closer. I had a message from Ren. She'd been at a friend's birthday. There were several photos that told a story I didn't need the captions for, and a few Slack notifications from the team I'd look at in the morning. I thought about my uncle's face when I said the number. Not with satisfaction exactly. Or not only that. It was more complicated than satisfaction, the way anything is when it involves people you've known your whole life. I thought about my grandmother's grey eyes and her small nod. I thought about Ren saying stop apologizing for taking up space. I thought about how long it took me to understand that silence isn't the same as humility, that staying small to make other people comfortable isn't grace, it's just a different kind of avoidance. I'd built something real. I'd done it without anyone watching, and for a long time I'd thought that was the point, proof that I didn't need the validation. But sitting at that table, watching my uncle reset his understanding of me in real time, I understood something I hadn't before. It wasn't about proving anything, it was just about being known. Accurately. By the people who were supposed to know you. I merged onto the gardener and let the city come to meet me. Whatever came next, I was done making myself smaller than I was, not because I needed anyone to see me, but because I'd finally stopped being afraid of what happened when they did. I keep thinking about what my grandmother did when I told her I'd built something real. She didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" with that particular edge people use when they mean how dare you keep this from me. She just looked at me with those grey eyes and gave me that small, quiet nod, the kind that meant she'd already decided something about me a long time ago, and the number just confirmed it. That nod stayed with me the whole drive home on the 403. There's a version of this story where I feel triumphant, where the point is that I sat across from my uncle and finally got to say the thing that proved him wrong, and that felt like winning. But that's not quite what it was. What I actually felt, merging onto the gardener with the city lights coming up, was something closer to relief. Like I'd finally stopped holding my breath. For years I told myself that staying quiet was the mature choice. That letting my uncle have his assumptions was gracious, even generous. I wasn't going to compete, wasn't going to make family dinners into a contest. And maybe there was some truth in that early on. But somewhere along the way, the quiet stopped being principled and started being protective. I was afraid that if I said it out loud and something went wrong, the fall would be public. So I kept the whole thing inside where it was safer. What I understand now is that there's a difference between humility and hiding. Real integrity, the kind that actually holds up, doesn't require you to make yourself invisible. I'd confused the two for a long time. I thought staying small was a sign of character. It wasn't. It was avoidance dressed up as virtue. Ren saw it before I did, which is one of the many reasons she's my business partner and not just someone I used to know. She has this way of being direct without being unkind. She'd tell me I was shrinking, and then she'd go back to whatever she was doing because she knew I'd need time to sit with it before I could hear it properly. That's its own kind of intelligence, knowing when to speak and when to let the silence do the work. And the work itself, that mattered, not the revenue number, not the direct account, the actual work of building something from a rented room with second-hand equipment and a client list that started at zero. There were months that were genuinely hard, months where I questioned the whole thing, but I kept going, not because I was certain it would work, but because I decided the discomfort of trying was better than the safety of not. That stubbornness, that willingness to stay in the difficult thing long enough for it to become something. That's what my uncle's comment could never touch, even when I was letting it land. My uncle said something I didn't expect, standing at the edge of my grandmother's ravine in the April cold. He said, "You've built something real." He said it carefully, like he was weighing it. I think it cost him something to say. I don't hold the years of dismissal against him, not because I've decided to be saintly about it, but because I understand now that he could only see what I showed him, and I hadn't shown him anything. That's on me. And it's also the thing I'm done repeating. My grandmother made a wish over her lemon cake and didn't tell anyone what it was. I have a feeling I know. Some things you carry quietly for a long time, and then one day you set them down, not with fanfare, just with the simple decision that you're done carrying them. I'm done carrying this one.